The topic of today's video are fruit and vegetables unhealthy for us. Let's get into that. What's shaking bacon? So I had an interesting conversation with somebody this week, and it was a bit of a friendly debate, and the guy had a really valid point. So I was watching YouTube this week, and I left a comment on a video about carnivores and how it helped me. And I gave a brief sentence about how I just feel better and I've lost weight and it's corrected a lot of my health problems. And somebody made a response to that, and they made a couple very valid points. And I'll just read their comment to you. He said, "I'm happy for you, but most people can handle fruit. I am not villainizing carnivore, but you guys are villainizing fruits and vegetables. This is a sad day when fruit and vegetables are talked about in the same manner as McDonald's. Carbohydrates from fruit sugars are not the same as corn syrup. The human body is extremely adaptable to whatever energy source it consumes. Inuits have been doing this for thousands of years. All I'm saying is stop saying fruits and vegetables are bad. They may be for you, which I actually doubt, but they are not bad for you." So let's break this down a bit. He had a couple really interesting points. The first one I want to focus on more than anything is his comment about how carnivores are villainizing fruits and vegetables. We have to understand and appreciate this is the norm out there. This is what lots of people have been doing for decades. We've been brought up for generations, not just a couple generations here. We've been brought up for generations being told fruit and vegetables are healthy. But what we didn't know, and we're really starting to learn more and more, and thousands of people are getting turned on to this more and more at a time each year, is that these foods cause inflammation in their body, and it causes a lot of joint pain, amongst other problems. When we go on and we start talking about how these foods hurt us and aggravate us and cause us health problems, it can be offensive to some people. And I don't think this fellow is a vegetarian or a vegan or anything like that. He just has a hard time grasping that these foods can actually cause harm to people because it's been ingrained in us since we were young people that it's healthy food. Let's break this down a bit because I don't want to offend anyone. Just because my views differ from somebody else's doesn't mean that I'm right or they're right. I think everyone has different health needs, and some people can manage fruits and vegetables just fine. Some other people can't. And what I've noticed is the older people get, the less we are able to manage sugar in the body. So when we talk about how these foods don't agree with us as carnivores, what we've done is we've changed our fuel source from proteins, fats, and carbohydrates, which include sugar, down to just proteins and fats. And we've eliminated the carbohydrates and sugars. And we found doing that, the vast majority of people doing that have actually had a lot of relief from their different health problems. Some people don't want to hear that because they don't even want to try it because it sounds so far out there. I think the one thing we have to watch out for is that we're not coming off as demonizing a particular food group just because it doesn't agree with us. We may find the more people that do this way of eating get a lot of relief, but we still got to watch how we present it to people, right? We don't want to turn around and vilify anything that anyone does because most of the people out there eat fruit and vegetables. So when you turn around and tell lots of people out there who are indeed healthy that what they're doing is wrong, they could get quite offended by that, especially since they've been, pretty fit or healthy people for most of their lives, right? And they have a hard time wrapping their mind around this newer way of thinking. So just to get that out of the way, I want to make sure that as we, not just me talking to you, but whenever you talk to other people about carnivore, we want to watch how we phrase things because I've been guilty of it. I've done it myself. We just want to make sure that we're not indirectly offending anybody as we talk about how good this is for us. So a point this fellow made was corn syrup and fruit are not the same sugars, and we shouldn't be comparing the two. One of the problems with corn syrup is the fructose. Now, lots of fruits out there have fructose in them. So people might argue, yeah, but it's balanced with fiber, which slows the absorption of it. But it's still fructose. There's not one study out there I think anyone could find that says fructose is actually good for you. Is it a fast fuel source? Absolutely. That's really good. There are benefits to it. You can't say it's all evil. But some people's bodies just don't agree with it. And until you cut it out, you have no idea if it's helping or hurting you, right? We do know fructose is bad. We do know sugar's bad. So right off the bat, anything that's a fruit has usually quite a bit of sugar in it. I think there's certain fruits out there like lemons and limes that are so ridiculously low, you would have to have a large amount for it to have any impact whatsoever. But for the most part, most fruits, and you can probably do a Google search and see this. I know I did. And you can find out what lists of fruits are out there, highest to lowest in fructose and sugar per serving. Now, we don't want to have any of that as carnivores because we just find it doesn't agree with us. Is it bad for us? Well, yeah, we know fructose isn't good for us. We know sugar is not good for us. Yes, sugar serves a purpose. Our body makes its own sugar, but it makes it as it needs it. It doesn't just make it in abundance just because. So we have to watch that when we're saying we're on a zero carb diet, when we're on just a meat only diet, we want to make sure that we understand our body's still getting sugar because it's making it. And I think most carnivores know this. But once again, it's how we relay it to people, right? We don't want to come off high-handed about it. We have to watch that we don't get too overzealous about talking about this. I know I've done it in the past. I'm one of those people, when I find something I like, I want to share it with everyone I know, whether it's food, a movie, a TV show, music, anything. So when it comes to a way of eating, and people have prided themselves on eating healthy most of their lives, and we come around and say, what I find is my eating works really well and yours kind of sucks. Without directly saying that, that's kind of how they might take it, right? We have to watch that because we all know sugar is not healthy for the body in any way, shape, or form. It creates inflammation in the body. It feeds cancer. It creates obesity. There's not many good things that sugar does for the body other than a quick fuel source. And quite frankly, a bit of a dirty fuel source compared to fat, but it is still a fuel source. But what about vegetables? Vegetables aren't as high in lots of these sugars as fruits typically is. So are they unhealthy for you? Well, yeah, some vegetables are, but most vegetables still have a lot of natural sugars in them because they're carbohydrate based. Most of their fuel is carbohydrate, and carbohydrates convert to sugar. Let's talk about, for example, rice, wheat, and potatoes. Those are kind of the staple of most North American diets, right? So most anyone is having any one of those three things multiple times a day, virtually every day of the week. Now, that's the vast majority of people out there. But there are some people who stay away from that for various reasons, or they manage it really well. What we find as carnivores are those foods can still affect us in a negative way because once those carbohydrates digest, it turns to sugar in the body. So it's just a different type of sugar for the body. Now, let's take a more extreme example, someone who's diabetic. When someone's diabetic, they have to monitor their blood sugar all throughout the day and their insulin. The problem with that is if they even have a nice big veggie stir fry, a veggie stir fry is still going to spike their sugar, especially if they're not active after their meal. So one of the best things we can do is be active after a meal. So people who are diabetic, and let's face it, I think the numbers are about a third of the population is diabetic. And people who are pre-diabetic, I believe it adds up to another third of the population. That's a large part of the population of people who are battling with blood sugar problems. And so there's a lot of people out there in those categories that do exercise and they do try and watch their way of eating. But the problem is, we've been taught that fruit and vegetables are part of our healthy diet. But if we have certain health problems, we're not able to have those foods and process them very well. The fact that we have those health problems is really another way of saying that our body is allergic to sugar. Our bodies just don't manage it well when we have these health problems. So as far as these health problems go, where this is an issue for most people, I would say is obesity, diabetes, and arthritis. When you have any of these health problems, typically you're dealing with an inflamed body and your body just can't process sugar that well. And when you cut out the sugar in all its forms, not just most of the forms, but all the forms, and you go down to a protein and fat only diet, what happens is lots of those health problems start going into remission very fast, within days. So people on their diabetic medication start going on weaker dosages to the point where they eventually go off their medication. Obese people start losing weight, and people who have joint stiffness from arthritis, the vast majority of that pain or all of the pain completely goes away for these people. So what happens when they start reintroducing those foods, even in moderation, their problems come back. So one of the other problems is sugar addiction. Now, some people just can't manage their carbohydrates. I can't manage my carbohydrates. I try, I just can't. I tried it for years. I talked about it in lots of other videos. And that's one of the main reasons why I do a carnivore diet. First and foremost is I've just accepted the fact I can't manage moderation with sugar. When I talk about not being able to manage sugar, it's not just chocolate bars and candy and different types of ice cream and cookies and cakes. It's carbohydrates like pizza as well. And when it comes to fruit, one of the points this fellow made was just because you can't handle your fruit doesn't mean a carnivore diet's going to fix that problem. You have bigger issues if you have that problem. I didn't respond to that point because, quite frankly, that's one of those things you have to experience. You can't explain to someone. It has corrected my way of eating as far as my sugar addiction goes. I don't crave sugar anymore. And the thing is, I can manage fruit. Fruit is one of those things I could care less about. I miss vegetables more than I miss fruit. But when it comes to fruit, I could live the rest of my life without fruit and not care. And that was before being a carnivore. So I can have just one apple at a time. I can have a handful of berries or grapes or anything like that at a time. I'm fine with that. But the problem with that is it keeps the sugar in my body. And having that sugar in my body keeps that sugar craving alive in my body, and I can't manage it. Even having artificial sweeteners keeps that sugar craving alive in my body. And from there, I go to all the junk food that I can't manage in portions. I can't manage a little bit of chips. I can't name someone who can. I can't manage ice cream or pizza or cake or anything like that, or donuts. I don't have one donut. I have 5 or 6 donuts. But for a lot of time, I thought it was because I just couldn't manage food and I had some sort of eating disorder that, why is it I can't have just one donut? I have to have a bunch. It turned out it was more sugar addiction than anything else. It wasn't just that I had a large appetite. It was the sugar addiction. And I had to give into that addiction like a smoker would with a cigarette. Look at it like that. That's how most carnivores might explain themselves. Alcoholics with alcohol, smokers with cigarettes. They give into those cravings, and we understand when they do that, there's an addiction there. We do know sugar is addictive, but it's harder to accept, especially for someone who's been able to manage it their whole life. I've been able to manage alcohol my whole life, not an issue. Smoking was something I never got into, but alcohol is a more real addiction for people. Smoking is a real addiction for people. It's hard to accept someone having a sugar addiction. So when we see people on top of their health problems that they have because of their sugar addiction, what lots of them don't realize is sugar addiction is the core of that problem. And people who are doing a carnivore diet have learned when they cut that out, their health problems get managed. So all carnivores have done is switch their fuel source from proteins, carbs, and fats to proteins and fats. So it's nothing really that revolutionary or dramatic, but the reality is we got to watch how we phrase it to people because it can come off as weird. Everyone who does this knows it's a sort of out there way of eating and it's not really socially acceptable. People barely said anything to me when they saw me stuffing my face with pizza or ice cream. But the minute I went down to a carbohydrate-free diet and I was only having protein and fat, people were like, what are you doing? Like, that's just unhealthy. You can't do that. And the more you start researching that, the more you go down the rabbit hole and you find out there's nothing important about carbohydrates in our diet. Our bodies do not need carbohydrates one iota. It is a non-essential macronutrient. We need fats and we need protein, but we don't need carbohydrates. In fact, for lots of these people with different health problems, carbohydrates are a hindrance to us. And all we've done is knocked it out because we found we feel better without it. It's not something that's easy for people to understand and appreciate the first time they hear about it, right? So we got to watch that we don't, 1, be too pushy, 2, maybe we learn how to get a feel for the person, and 3, try not to unload all our information on them at once when we first start talking about it, because you can get real overzealous with this information because how it's affected your life in such a positive way. People who have never had these struggles, or more importantly, people who have these struggles and don't realize it because they just chalk it up to age, have a hard time wrapping their minds around someone who's doing this way of eating. This fellow had a really good point. He has nothing against people who are on a carnivore diet, but what he does hate is people who are saying when they're on a carnivore diet that fruits and vegetables are bad for you, as bad as McDonald's or corn syrup. Now we have to appreciate not everyone's done the same amount of research as we have. We have to watch that when we talk to people, we respect their values so that we can get that same respect back. And quite often, we may not get that same respect back. But if we're the ones that can just plant that seed and then just maybe divert the conversation and change the topic before we get too involved in it, it'll give them something to think about for a while. And then they might come back and ask some questions. And then you can talk a little bit about it and just water it that little bit. And then water it a little more each time instead of just trying to go all in all at once, because it might be offensive to some people. Because what we're saying to them is, yeah, everything you've been doing your whole life isn't good. And we don't mean to come across like that, but that's sometimes how they hear it. So anyway, I hope you're all doing well out there. Hope everyone's having a safe, long weekend. And if you like this video, give it a thumbs up and subscribe. Hope to talk to you later. Bye-bye.